Hello, Connective. Welcome back. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you don't know how I work, I pull a bunch of different cards from different decks that tell a story and we talk about it. And if you like the content, feel free to subscribe. Don't smash anything. And with that being said, let's get into this energy. So we do actually have a question today. This is going to be one of the question readings, and the question is, how do I set clear boundaries? So how do I set clear boundaries? We're going to pull from multiple decks, and we'll pull some of the moon for the zodiac, and then we'll address each zodiac in the extended. There will be an extended. So these are actually shuffled. Let's see if we can get any energy cards to help us talk about how to set clear boundaries. Honestly, I thought about bringing out the empath empowerment cards, but you know, there's a card that says set clear boundaries. It doesn't really tell us how, and I'm sure those other cards could tell us how, but I have something else in mind, so we'll just see how this goes. Technically, we could ask this question a bunch of times and get different answers from different cards. And I'm going to try to do this one more time, and if nothing jumps out, there we go. I was going to pull cards, but I don't have to. Okay. So, Energy Oracle, if I didn't say it. And let's see what we've got here. Ooh. Okay. I want to get into it right now, but that's Woman Holding a Heart and Victory. So now, okay. I'm going to do Alice the Wonderland. Alice the Wonderland, because there's a method to my madness right now. Okay, these are shuffled as well. Let's see what we can get to pop out next. Ooh, these are not extremely slippery. We may have to pull one of these. All right. Setting clear out boundaries, Alice. Anything? Oh. Okay. All right. Let's put her down here, because that's a little bit more of a complicated message. Okay. And then let's do, okay, we're going to do the triggers first. Again, there's a method if it pops. Oh, it did. One more time just to see. One more real time. Yeah, they're acting a little weird. Okay, so we'll take the two that fell. And then this, this is, okay, these might not be the same. Let's see. This is the shadow deck. Yeah. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Let's put them back. That's too many. That's just crazy. Can we have some of those back? Like just some or a couple? Yeah, that's crazy. That's like a 6-hour-long video. Come on, I know you want, look, I can see you wanted to talk. Oh, okay. We'll finish now, and then if nothing else wants to come out, that's fine. But yeah, not shaking a whole tree of, oh, look at that. Okay. We are also going to go for the codependency cards. Again, there's a reason for this. And they are all shuffled. All right. I might just like get through it once. Oh, okay, there we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, perfect. Okay. See, this is kind of a little bit more well balanced. I swear there's 2, 2, and 2 there. Okay. And then these are the balance cards. Speaking of balance. All right, yes. Come on. These are actually the Divine Masculine Feminine cards, but I guess I'm calling them the balance cards now. Oh, shoot. Okay. You know what? That was actually only a few extra. You know, we're just going to take them. The balance cards usually work nicely. Okay. Okay. So if you also know how I work, I talk a lot while I'm drawing cards. Okay, so setting boundaries. Okay. Well, okay. Let's talk about the woman holding heart. Card number 44 for anybody who likes numerology or likes the number 4. A lot of times, well, there's a couple things. It's funny because I was going to talk about like boundaries, which I kind of was thinking like after the fact, but this kind of almost really seems like beforehand. You know, a lot of times when we get into a relationship, it doesn't really matter what kind of relationship it is, but you know, love relationships could be maybe harder to set boundaries in like say, I was going to say abusive relationships. I guess we'll just use that term, because, well, you live with the person. So, you know, like if you were trying to set boundaries with somebody at work, like there's a certain time of the day or during the weekend or whatever that you don't even have to deal with that person, even have to worry about boundaries with that person. And then, you know, when you do decide to set boundaries with that person, you kind of might already have a plan of what you're going to do based on what they usually do. So like if they're doing a certain thing to you, I don't know why I thought of this, but like cutting you off at the copy machine. So every time you go to, you know, you're going, but then they come and then now you got to wait, you know, and it's every time. It's almost like they do it on purpose, you know. You would start to figure out a way to deal with that, right? But when you're in a situation, in a relationship, especially with somebody else who could be considered to be like, well, I was going to say the oppressor, but I guess that's a decent word, because even if you weren't in a relationship like that was abusive, like you could still have an oppressor. I mean, you could have like an oppressive mother who loves you, or, you know, I mean, we are talking about different kinds of relationships, but again, we're back to the love relationship, because that one can be a little bit harder too, because when we get into these relationships, and, you know, even if like you're an empath, you know, you kind of like lend your whole heart out, you know, you're in it wholeheartedly. There's no part of yourself that you're keeping back, because that's how you love, you know. And if you don't establish some kind of boundaries, like at some point in the beginning, let's just say about something, about anything, then in a situation where the other person is an oppressor, they might, you know, they might not assume that you have any, like in any situation, or even when you do finally, like when you finally, I was going to say voice that, you know, they kind of don't care or whatever, you know, so before you give them your whole heart, you need to kind of know what type of person are they? Are they the type of person that would give you your boundaries? Because again, somebody could be oppressive and still let someone have boundaries. You know, it depends on the relationship. Relationships are so dynamic that you know, the difference between one person and another, they could have the same set of problems, but it might look totally different, you know, from the outsider to both people. And it's simply because these either like these same behaviors or the same coincidences or the same things that happen, or it might be different things that happen that provoke the same response, and then you get the same thing, and you understand. You don't even have to have gone through the same thing to mirror each other in a situation where you come together, because there's so many different variables that you could have easily ended up there with any combination of them. So what I'm saying is that it starts with you. It starts with when you decide, when you want to give that thing away, that you figure out like who you're giving it to. Because if you're giving it to someone that doesn't acknowledge other people's boundaries, you know, I try to think back to like people who didn't acknowledge my boundaries, and there was a lot of them. And the thing is I was trying to figure out in my head, like if they had boundaries that they stuck to. So in other words, they had their boundaries that they followed, but they didn't follow mine kind of thing. And I had a really hard time like discerning it because, you know, ultimately I kind of figured out, and this might not be the same for everybody, but I figured out that being in that relationship with that person, and again, it doesn't matter what kind of relationship, it could be a love partner, it could be a parent, it could be somebody at work, you know, but being in that relationship with that person was just one big boundary. It was just a giant wall that I was behind, you know. So of course I couldn't have boundaries because they couldn't even see them behind their giant wall, you know? And so again, you know, it does go back to like who you're dealing with. If you're dealing with someone who's an oppressor, who has their wall, I'm not even talking about boundaries, it's their straight wall up. Of course, there's ways you can get around their wall and stuff like that. But, you know, the question again is who you're dealing with, do you want to? You know, there is a certain person, this is actually talking about the onset, but let's say that you have already given your heart and then sort of figured out who this person was, and, you know, you're finding that you're having to, you know, restate your, or whatever, you're trying to set boundaries, right? That's about when the time that you get the inkling of whether or not this person is actually going to let you have boundaries. In other words, you kind of know if somebody's like really an oppressor and they're not going to let you have it, they're going to let you know right away. Or they're going to make you think that you might, you know, maybe, but then they're doing something else on the side, you know, either way. But most of the time, if they're an oppressor, they're going to let you know. Now, you don't get your boundaries. But if you are with someone that like truly cares about you and is just a nice person or a decent person, or again, like truly caring about you counts, like it weighs in with all those things and how they're going to treat you when you decide you want to set boundaries. If you don't set any boundaries in the beginning and that person thinks that you're, you just don't have any, and then you say, no, I actually do have them, or you just start to make them up. Hey, I don't like this. You know, that person, the person that really cares about you or is really in the relationship to be in the relationship, they're going to respect that. And the big reason why they're going to respect that is because they're going to expect you to respect their boundaries. So a well-balanced person is going to go, oh, you have a boundary? Let me pay attention, especially if they're the type of person that doesn't want to irritate you, because they're going to remember, oh, okay, let me just remind, I don't want her to be mad or him to be mad or them to be mad, you know, at me. I'm just going to pay attention to this. Like, even if I forget other stuff, like I get that this is really important and I will pay attention to this. And even if, you know, the person's forgetful or you kind of see they're not doing it maliciously, you know, it's a little different than what it looks like when somebody's not giving you your boundaries. So you have to, again, pay attention to who they are and don't turn everything over all at once, because once you get involved emotionally, it's kind of even harder for you to set boundaries. Well, first, it's very easy to make excuses for them. Oh, they didn't mean that, especially if they really hurt your feelings. Like if you're sensitive or something, it just hurts your feelings. And you kind of go, well, they didn't really mean it and this and that. And then, you know, the next thing you know, a year later, you're still kind of going, well, they didn't mean it. They're just rough hewn. And it's like, no, you need to realize that at some point you're going to have to understand what's happening. You know, and the fact of the matter is you don't have any boundaries. You don't get any boundaries. That's what it is. So I pulled the trigger cards. We're going to get back to Alice because this is just really interesting. But yeah, so the triggers first, because again, so we're trying to set boundaries. So we have, when I'm not confident with who I am, I will act in superficial ways. And I display codependent behaviors when I have feelings of low self-worth. So I'm really glad this card came out. I mean, I have codependent cards here anyway, but I really wanted the word codependent to be used, because this is another thing. You could just be like really fall for somebody and like give your heart away, like, you know, early in the beginning or just before you know them or whatever. You might have known them for months, but you didn't learn anything about them, kind of thing. It happens. Sometimes it happens because somebody does it on purpose. But codependent behaviors, it's the same thing. If you if I told you, hey, don't give your heart away all at once, but you keep doing it, you can't stop doing it, there's something in you that is bringing you to them just as much as you're bringing them to you. So in other words, you know, you're giving your heart away early because there's something in you that is telling yourself that you're going to get something out of it. And if you get somebody who actually does like really care and all that stuff, like that's possible that you will get something out of it. But if you're turning your heart over to somebody before you're actually setting boundaries, you're just making it harder on yourself, because ultimately, no matter what, the only thing I can tell you is it's harder to set boundaries after the fact. Again, if you have someone who cares, they will try, or they will do. And you only have to say it once, you know, it goes on a scale from you only have to say it once to you have to keep repeating yourself until they finally get it, or until you really put your foot down and they realize, you know, you're not joking. But again, when you do that in the beginning, you know, just automatically, and that person, whoever it is you're talking to, knows that you're not playing around with them, they're not going to test that theory. They're not going to want to poke a stick at you unless they're one of those people who just pokes a stick at people. And then again, you'll know. So being confident with who they are and acting in superficial ways. So let's say that this is, you're trying to set boundaries and this is you. Well, if you're not confident with who you are, not only will you not be able to set boundaries, but even if you did, you wouldn't keep them. And there's two outcomes to that, but we'll get back to that. Also, acting in superficial ways. So again, when you're trying to set boundaries, you need to let people know that you're serious, right? You don't want to be like, you know, I kind of have this boundary, but it's okay if you trample all over it. I'm cool with it. You know, it's not a boundary, you know, that's like a wish list or whatever. So, you know, when you're, you know, acting in a way that things aren't important, then people aren't going to assume that it's important, or they're going to assume you're joking or something of that nature, or they just won't take you seriously altogether when you try to set boundaries, especially if it's something that they don't believe and they don't understand. They're like, what do you mean? You know, they're not going to respect it, you know. Doesn't matter how much sense it makes, or, you know, how much of a deal breaker it is for you, honestly, because again, you have this other person, and if you want them to respect your boundaries, they have to respect your boundaries. If they don't, then they're not. So now again, with being confident in who you are. So when you set the boundary and then you're not confident in who you are, a lot of times, especially like if you're a sensitive person, like if you're an empath, and again, if you've given your heart away, then you sometimes break that boundary for them. So the other person doesn't even have to have the balls to do it, because you just do it for them. You, like, again, it's kind of one of those things where I have this thing, but you don't have to do it. It's okay. You know, it's fine. So you're kind of telling that person already that you don't even have to tell me no. I'm already telling you that you don't have to do it. But then on top of that, you know, they could still tell you no, even if you didn't do that and you weren't the type of person that like broke your boundary for them. They could still tell you no. If you're not confident, you're going to get sucked up into that. Oh, how am I supposed to negotiate my damn boundary? Which is, again, why would you need to if somebody actually respected you and your boundaries? And again, does this person have boundaries that they want you to respect? And what's going on there? Do they have boundaries that they're holding to that they expect you to respect, but then you don't have any, you're not even allowed to? I don't care if when you met that person, or you started talking to that person, or when you grew up or whatever, you didn't have any boundaries. You didn't know what you wanted. But then when you decide, you need to be able to speak up. And again, after you're already in that situation, speaking up sometimes doesn't get you anything. That person has to respect you. Okay, so that's the trigger part of it. And again, when you have boundaries, you don't want to let them trigger you, because what happens is you start fighting, you forget about everything else. And sometimes that's part of the plan. So because we had the name of the codependency, I pulled the codependency next. We'll get to the shadow after. So you know the situation has only gotten worse. Why do you continue to stay? All right, so we're down here. And worried that you will be absolutely alone. You are made to be likable and lovable. So worried that you will be absolutely alone. You were made to be likable and lovable. You know what's funny is, I know these are the codependency cards. Obviously, there has to be somebody else involved. Well, not really. It could just be you being codependent on other people. But in order for things to kind of go longer, yeah, if that other person is codependent, that's severely helpful. So, you know, you're talking here about setting boundaries and either being listened to or not listened to by the other person, right? But then over here, you have kind of like you being afraid to set boundaries for whatever reason. This is talking about not being confident in yourself, but worried that's a different way to be uncomfortable to the point where you can't set your own boundaries. And it's kind of like when you can't set the boundaries because that person doesn't want, you know the situation has only gotten worse. Why do you continue to stay? Okay, what this is telling me is that other person isn't going to bend. They know what boundaries you have. They know what you expect of them. Whatever it is that you're asking or what you say. Again, it could be any kind of relationship. I don't care what it is. And they know and they don't care. And they're like, why are you still here? They may not even want you to leave. And they still might feel that way. I probably could explain it, but it'd just be a waste of video. So worried that you will be absolutely alone. You were made to be likable and lovable. Do you feel like if you don't get away that you'll be better? That was a little backwards in the way that I said it. But, honestly, like, in the event that you cannot be yourself, because that's really what we're talking about. Sure, boundaries is a fancy word for having sovereignty, but if you can't be yourself, you can't be allowed to feel a certain way about the way other people treat you. And especially if it's like that other person, like that person that you're in direct contact with, right? That, let's call them, your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your significant other, right? But then what happens when they don't treat you right and neither does their mom or their brother or whatever the hell? Then what are we talking about here? Because I didn't sign up to be in a relationship with them. And I didn't sign up in a relationship to be by myself. And especially if I'm not allowed to say what's on my mind. And especially when it has to do with me. So if you're codependent on this, then it's going to be harder for you to set that boundary because you're going to be afraid about what they're going to take away. I don't know why you're not thinking about what they're already taking away. So now we've got in the shadow. We're in the shadow now. So inconsistent. Think about if your thoughts, actions, and routines are inconsistent. Does it serve you well on a daily basis? I'm going to get to that. Holy Christ, it's backwards. Boundaries. Develop healthy boundaries to make sure you are emotionally and mentally stable. It's okay to say no. Yeah, and you could keep saying no. And you could even say no after the fact. And you could even say no in ways where people understand. I'm not going to give the details of the story, but I had a relationship with somebody for a long time. And then we got out of it. And then we didn't talk for about a month. And then we talked again for another 6 months. And during that time, that person started to do the same stuff that they were doing before. And I remember I responded differently. And when that person said, you didn't stick around, you didn't, and I said, you and I don't have one of those kind of relationships where you do this, this, and this. And he said, I know, but the thing was, it didn't really matter because I knew he was going to be him and I was going to be me, right? Like that was already the beginning of, oh, here we go. I'm just supposed to, the same shit, right? And I had boundaries. I wasn't really allowed to have, but then definitely when I had like my own place to go, I was like, well, I'm not doing this. Sorry, I'm not doing that either. And sorry, today's not your day for that. And it just went from there. This phone. This is like the second time today that that's happened. Okay, holy, I just got shorter. That's awesome. I have to Now I'm taller. Okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry. You know what? I might not even cut this out because, you know, it's going to have to be like that. I'm a little shorter. Taller? Let me try it one more time. Lord of mercy. Okay. What we got? It's more normal. Okay. So boundaries. I mean, again, it's how do we set boundaries. So we will definitely talk more about that in the extended. And I'm going to pull some zodiac cards. I don't know if I said that already. I probably did. We are going to talk about that a little bit and specific to each zodiac sign. And I've kind of already talked about it, but before this video ends, I'm going to reiterate what the most important part of this is, so that you get the essence of it. Because setting boundaries, it takes time. It takes you maybe having to restate it. You maybe having to wait for that situation to happen again for you to understand if that person remembered. A lot of things, especially if you have a process to go through that you're contributing to your lack of boundaries. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. It takes a little time, right? If you're inconsistent about it, being backwards, sorry, I'm never going to give that up. I'm going to try to reverse that really soon here, but I love to show you this. I know you can't read it unless you can read backwards. So, you know, if you're inconsistent about your boundaries, sometimes you care about them, but sometimes you don't, you're just going to confuse people. Even the people that want to honor your boundaries, they're going to be confused about when it's okay and when it's not okay to do that, because you're breaking your own boundaries at your whim, and then you're probably getting mad at them for breaking your boundaries on their whim, or something like that, where the two don't go together, so that you know your boundaries are wobbly, basically, you know. So yeah, we have to pull the moons. I want to do the balance cards in the extended, and I want to do these cards in the extended, but I'll pull one of these, and then we'll pull more cards on these in the extended. Okay. Yeah, maybe the energy deck will talk again. All right, so these are shuffled. I do want to get one of each out for the zodiac signs and the message that's attached to them. We'll see what we can do. That is full moon in Gemini. Embrace the flow of life. You know, honestly, I'll just say to this right now too, you know, when you do have boundaries, when you are able to set them, or just say that you have boundaries and everything and everybody just respects all your boundaries, life does have a little bit of a different quality to it. If you haven't seen it, if you can't, you know, you can't like envision it, you know, it is different, you know, and you don't have to train everybody. People, perfect strangers will know when you're not messing with them. We're going to go through this one more time, and if it doesn't pop, we're going to pull two more cards. I don't think I dropped any more. Yeah, no. So yeah, one more time, and then we'll cut it, and we'll pull. You know what I'd like to do here? I'm going to split it in half, and then I want to pull it off the bottom. First quarter moon in Leo, be humble. So we have embrace the flow of life, be humble, and then off the top comes lighten up. This card came out in the last reading. Last quarter moon in Leo, lighten up. Okay. All right, so we'll get into Leo, and Gemini in the extended. But for this one, these are shuffled too, but I'm going to shuffle them a little bit. And you know, we didn't talk much about it, this card here, but this really is, you know, kind of like being in a hurry. You know, it's just clock time, you know, it's basically, you know, chasing the white rabbit, you know, pressure. And, you know, yeah, it does take time. I don't even know if I could talk about that long enough. It really depends, and it's going to keep going back to who you're dealing with. And speaking of who you're dealing with, you know, again, it makes the difference as to whether or not it's worth it to try to get them to honor your boundaries, or if it's better to just separate yourself from them because you're getting something out of it that you maybe want, maybe aren't aware of, but you're also not getting something that you want, and one might outweigh the other. Or, you know, at the very least, your own boundaries and inconsistencies that are pulling the strings on this thing. And it's one of those things where, you know, you're going to have to, like, get clarity on that. And again, don't be pressured to do that. If it falls together like that for you, great. But, you know, most of the time it's a little bit of a, especially if you have multiple boundaries. I mean, people aren't going to just automatically learn all your boundaries. I mean, I'm not saying that you would come up with a bunch of boundaries all at once, but I'm just saying that if you did, or you met somebody and all of a sudden they needed to learn everything, it might take them a little bit of time. The other thing I want to address in this video is on clock time, that word pressure there. When you do start to try to set your boundaries with other people, at any time, but definitely like after for some reason they've perceived you to not have boundaries and then they find out that you do, you're going to get pressure from them. Sometimes people are, this is an example, this is a perfect example, so I'm just going to use it, but sometimes people are like in a relationship that they've been in for maybe decades, and then they start to go through like a spiritual awakening, and they start to realize that their partner hasn't treated them like very nice, or there's actually a good possibility that their partner doesn't even care. Like they start to have these like realizations like for the first time in their lives, and they have to deal with that or they'll go mad. I mean, you know, so it's one of those things where they start to speak up and say, hey, you know, I don't really like this situation, or I don't like it when this happens. And then they get pushback from that other person. It ranges anywhere from, what are you talking about? You're being ridiculous, to you're being mean, right? So then you get this, I'm trying to set boundaries, but they're not really hearing me. But it's not really like, what? I didn't hear you. It's more like, oh, you know, stop it. Or, you know, I can't believe that you said that to me, or you're being this way, or, you know, there's a lot of ways to put it, okay? A lot of ways to put it. You just got to put it in a category. Oh, I get it. I'm supposed to feel guilty because you're codependent. You don't like it now that I have a request that has to do with both of us in this relationship. You know, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get pressure from others and multiple people, especially. And you need to remember too, that there's a good possibility in these situations, in these relationships, that you were a better friend or a better whatever, and that they were getting something out of you that they're not getting anymore when you set your boundaries. Because we don't just set boundaries randomly. We don't walk around and go, what can I make a rule on today? We usually do it because it messes with us and other people are involved. And we say, you know what? We even set boundaries with ourselves. We do something stupid. We spend too much money or whatever. We go, well, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to take that much cash with me again. Or whatever, however we do it, that we know that when we're setting that boundary, we're not going to break it. Not we're going to leave our cash at home and then get our credit card out. And again, if you're trying to set boundaries with other people and you're breaking your own boundaries in front of them, you're going to confuse them. They're not going to understand when they're supposed to follow and when not. Strength and guidance. Strength and guidance is basically telling me to be specific, to not only be specific, but to be consistent, to be specific about how you feel or what, make sure that the person is clear as you are about the why. I don't even care if it's like, you know what, I don't know why I don't like that. I just don't like it. Like if it was some kind of food and it was the other person's favorite food and they said, well, why don't you like it? I don't know. I just don't like it. I don't like the way it tastes. It tastes like this to me or whatever. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't want you to eat something that tastes like that. I'll just eat it, you know, and I won't pressure you about it anymore. But again, it's a distance between, you know, giving away your heart and getting that victory with that person that's letting you set boundaries. And then, you know, clock time, you're on clock time, but, you know, you can also be pressured during that time. So that can even make it harder. You start to wonder, was this worth it? Is this person, can I even set a boundary with them? You know? Yeah. Those I know I want to pull the extended and I want to pull that in the extended too. So, and I want to do these in the extended. So we've gone through other cards. So again, we have Gemini, embrace the flow of life. So full moon in Gemini. And then first quarter moon in Leo, be humble. And then last quarter moon in Leo, lighten up. So as far as the message in this video for these, as far as setting boundaries goes, you know, again, embrace the flow of life kind of tells me to sort of like pick your battles when you're trying to set boundaries. Sometimes it's not a good time. I mean, the person's going through something, their brain is doing something else, or it's an emergency situation and somebody forgets, you know, I just feel the need to say that. You know, sometimes it should be like, depending on what the boundary is, you know, either forgiven or just, you know, hey, I get that you're having a hard time, so I'm not going to make a big deal about this right now. But, you know, kind of like, hey, I saw that, I noticed it, but, you know, I'm not going to pressure you or whatever. So, and as far as being humble goes, again, to me, that's telling me about like other people's boundaries. Don't expect them to honor your boundaries if you don't honor theirs. I mean, good people aren't going to reciprocate on that. You know, I mean, they just probably wouldn't even be around you, but if they were forced to be around you, like at work or something like that, you know, and you're just trampling all over, you're cutting in front of them in the copy machine, you know, they're not going to feel bad about cutting in front of you at the copy machine and doing probably other stuff too. So you need to keep that in mind when you're trying to set boundaries. Are you following the other person's boundaries? Are you paying attention? And then also lighten up here. Again, you know, the boundaries, yes, depending on how serious the boundary is, yes. If it's something that's not, you know, deadly or, you know, I mean, so many other categories that, you know, that are offensive, obviously, yes, you want to hold your boundaries. But there'll be some times when you'll just kind of have to pick your battles and you'll have to just say, you know, I have this boundary, we're doing better with it, but today I'm going to let this slide a little bit because of this. And it could be something as simple as the circumstances that the situation is around. I can't think of anything specifically, but I don't think it matters that much because at this point, for everybody, it's going to be different as far as like the severity of whether or not, depending on the you know, what's going on and the boundary they're trying to save. So, you know, it doesn't even make sense to try to throw something out there on a gauge where everybody has different gauges. But you all know what I'm talking about. Right? So you just have to remember to have that strength, to know, you know, strength and guidance, the strength to set the boundary, know when to enforce it, you know, that it's going to happen in time, but it might also be, some of the time might go by because you're being pushed. You know, with some people, you will have a victory. For some of them, or if you have to make all new friends, those people will get it, you know, because you'll make friends that will get it. And don't give them your heart right away because you've already learned, you know, make sure you deal with your triggers. If you've got boundaries that you're trying to set and people are trying to trigger you because of whatever, if your boundaries have something to do with toxicity or something like that, you need to be aware of your triggers. If your codependency is part of what's making it so that you can't set boundaries, then you need to deal with your codependency. And if your shadow is part of the reason why you can't set boundaries, or if you're inconsistent with your boundaries, then you need to go into your shadow and you need to look at that. All right, so we'll talk about this, the rest of this in the extended. Again, if you're Gemini, Leo, or Leo, or if this resonated with you, meet us over there. If not, until we meet again.